adopted my best friend's son because his entire family died in an accident. 15 years later he proposed to my daughter who he's raised since she was a baby. Back in 2001, my best friend's family died tragically in a car accident and only their 16-year-old son survived. My wife and I took him into our home for over 4 years while he finished school and he was able to stand on his own. I saw him as one of my children and I was so proud of what he was able to accomplish. Wayne's wife and I gave him a monetary donation for him to start his own business. It quickly became wildly successful. He's now 36 and has grown into a fine young man. That was until we learned the truth this past Sunday at a family dinner. There, my 21-year-old daughter informed the entire family that she was engaged to him. In fact, they had been dating for the past 3 years. She delivered the news so happily, and clapped when she revealed the news, clearly expecting us to get up and congratulate her. But we all felt incredibly betrayed and blindsided. The amount of lies and secret keeping they had to be telling to keep this relationship from us is astonishing. Not only is the large age difference very disturbing to us, but they were raised as siblings and she would refer to him as her big brother when she was a child. It was all very disgusting and I knew I had lost my appetite. I told them both that I did not approve of their relationship and he was no longer allowed in my home. As long as my daughter continued this relationship, she was also disowned. Alienating my daughter would probably cause more harm, but I don't want her to think that I accept their relationship by treating her like nothing's wrong. She's definitely the victim in all this and I want to be there for her, but she's not happy about me banning her fiancé from our house. I told her I wanted this relationship to end immediately because I am disgusted and angered. This man who I thought was my son, had been preying on my young daughter for God knows how long. He helped raise her for God's sake. He babysat her, changed her diapers, came to family dinners every week, went on family vacations, etc. He may not have been biologically mine, but he was raised as such and that should have let him know that my daughter is off limits. He was a constant part of her life since she was 1. There should be no reason why he chose my daughter of all the girls in the world to be with. My wife and I talked the situation over and we decided to go to our daughter's apartment. I first apologized to her over my initial reaction that came out of anger. I made it clear that her safety and well-being was my first concern. We had a long discussion, and there were some things that my daughter said that alarmed me, such as her loving him while she was 14 and he was 29 and them not doing anything intimate until she was 18, which meant that bastard was preying on my daughter and waiting for her to turn 18 to sink his claws into her. However, since their engagement has now become public, concerned family members have contacted me with events that seemed innocent at the time, but now seem suspicious. For example, my wife's sister told us about a time when our kids were at her house. My daughter was 16 and he was 31.
My neighbor's door and his meat fell into my mouth. I, F25, had just finished my shift at the hospital and was feeling adventurous. I decided to take my wild side out for a spin. I walked through my neighborhood, my heart pounding with excitement. As I passed by a particularly big house, I noticed the lights were on and heard faint music playing inside. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to investigate. I approached the front door and rang the doorbell, my heart racing in anticipation. A stranger, a handsome man in his early 30s, opened the door. His eyes widened in surprise as he looked at me. He asked how I can help him, his voice filled with curiosity. I smiled seductively, my eyes filled with desire. I told him that if I noticed the festive atmosphere of his house and asked if I could join in on the fun. The man chuckled, clearly intrigued by my audacity. Yet he nodded as he smiled. With that, he opened the door wider and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside and the house was filled with people laughing and mingling. I followed the man through the crowd, my eyes scanning the room for a secluded spot. I found it, a dimly lit hallway with an open door leading to a small study. Without hesitation, I pulled him inside. Closing the door behind us, the man leaned against the wall, his eyes fixated on me. I wasted no time. I dropped to my knees, my hands quickly undoing his pants. His throbbing shaft sprang free, already hard with anticipation. I took his D into my mouth, my lips forming a tight seal around his throbbing D. I sucked and licked, my tongue swirling around his D, driving him to the brink of pleasure. His moans filled the study, his hands tangled in my hair as I deep-throated him. I bobbed my head up and down, taking him in as far as I could, relishing the taste of his pre-spunk on my tongue as I continued to suck and blow him with my mouth. His legs trembled. I knew he couldn't hold back any longer. I sucked and blew him harder like my IFE depended on it. With a groan, he exploded, filling my mouth with his hot and sticky load. I swallowed every last drop and even licked my lips as I looked up at him. Breathing heavily, he leaned against the wall for support, his body still trembling from the intensity of his climax. I smiled at him as I wiped my mouth with the back of my mouth. What a fun way to end the day. All the tiredness from my shift was gone and replaced with nothing but satisfaction.
College roommate let me sit on her boyfriend's meat for a little bit. So, a while ago, 19, borrowed my roommate's, 19, toy to have some fun while she was out with her boyfriend. It turned out that the toy was one of those cloning kits that she used on her BF May 21. For context, it felt amazing and it was very nice in size. Fast forward to yesterday, I was on FaceTime with her and we were sharing some rather intimate details about our experiences, and I admitted to her that I had juiced one time using her toy clone of her boyfriend's D. She was kinda shocked at first, but I could tell she was kinda flattered that her boyfriend's D got another girl off so well, especially squirting. After the initial shock wore off, she kinda half-jokingly suggested that if I wanted to maybe I could sit on it for a bit and see how it really feels. I laughed and said I'd love to try it firsthand, and then she said I should come over and that he was already almost to her house to come visit. I was a little stunned but decided to see where the day would go since I didn't have anything else to do. I arrived at her house, and she walked me upstairs to her room, where her Beth was already sitting in the chair at her desk. I kind of blushed when I greeted him, and he laughed, saying my friend already filled him in. I was mortified, but also extremely turned on by the fact that the owner of the DA that made me squirt was so close at hand. My friend told him to drop his pants, and he did, and the same D sprung out already hard. She looked at me, and I could feel my cheeks burning red and my kitty sopping. "Go ahead, Lexi," she giggled. I walked over and grabbed it, feeling it throb in my hands, imagining what it would feel like. I looked back at my friend, and she gave me an encouraging gesture, so I took my pants and undies off and turned around to lower myself onto him. I was already dripping down my leg, so it slid right in, and I gasped. It was so deep and stretched me so well, just like the toy did. I sat there with it inside me, as my friend watched. I couldn't help it after 30 seconds of just letting it soak inside me. I was already starting to bounce up and down desperately, and it wasn't long before I was squirting all over her boyfriend and the floor. I got up after my climax, sheepishly laying down on the bed, flustered as I watched my friend finish her boyfriend off and take his load inside. I hope next time she lets me take his load instead.
What's your naughtiest story from a school trip? When I was 19, I volunteered as a chaperone for my local elementary school, which meant that I had the esteemed privilege of taking 22nd graders to the zoo. There were other chaperones, so I was responsible for taking care of 6 specific kids. What I didn't know was that one of the kids had an older brother who volunteered at the zoo. I took my group to the penguin exhibit, and the craziest second grader, Benjamin, immediately sprinted away from us. I didn't know it initially, but he went to go find his brother because he knew his brother was working there, and, obviously, I had to chase after him with my other 5 children. When we finally caught up to Benji, he proudly introduced us to his older brother, who was easily the most gorgeous man I'd ever met. I swear, Benji's brother could be a model. He had all the stereotypically attractive features, like a nice jawline and good hair and also a surprisingly well-fitted uniform, but he had the brightest, most engaged eyes I'd ever seen. When Benji's brother Simon looked at you, it felt like you were the whole world. I think I swooned on the spot or something because I immediately fell in love. I stuttered through some conversation, but we had to leave. However, while the kids ate lunch with the other chaperones, I made a point to sneak off to the penguin exhibit again. Simon wasn't anywhere immediately in sight, but I kept checking around because I needed his number. When I finally ended up in the bathroom because I got tired and needed to pee. There, I discovered Simon getting hot and heavy with another zoo worker, and the wildest part is that they asked me to join. Obviously, I couldn't because I had to go back super soon to take care of my second graders, but I went back alone to the zoo another time and caught Simon again. His little female friend, he said that they weren't in a relationship, wasn't around, so we went on a date and then we hooked up in the bathrooms. Luckily, no one was around this time to see us, and I felt very fortunate, for once, for volunteering on the school trip. I love it when men rope me. It all started when my dad did it first when I was 13. And I loved every second of it all. He did it to me until I was 17, and it got to a point where I would wait for him to sneak into my room each night to do it. I pretended not to enjoy it, but man, I loved it. This developed into an obsession of having all of the men I date to rope me. I purposely put myself in situations where this can happen. I know the only solution anyone can offer is therapy. When I was in my 20s I tried to stray from this path. I was in my head a lot, and every fantasy seemed to take me down a dark path no matter how hard I tried to resist. Now I am recently single and loving it. I tried to do it normally, give my permission, but it did not feel the same. I don't enjoy it. I've slept with 2 guys in the past few months, and they were just so sweet and caring and hyper-conscientious. My brain hated it, and my body was extremely turned off, and it just ended up hurting. Then I got super intoxicated and we did it after. That felt unbelievable, because he was sober. I feel like I've been cursed or I'm being punished for daring to think I could find romantic happiness. I got the courage to leave something that offered absolutely zero fulfillment only to still be denied because of this weird mental preference. Again, I know therapy is the answer, but it's just not fair. Who knows how long this'll take to fix. A few weeks later I went to a nightclub, and found myself in a dark alley with 2 guys roping me at the end of the night, and I found myself enjoying it all. The saddest part is that my ex, the lazy piece of crap that he was the only person willing to rope me a few times, and the few times he did, it was the best moments of my life. I long not to be like this, but I'm deranged.
When I turned 19, I let my dad eat me on the couch a few times. I've never told anyone this because it's way too out there, but I need to get it out. So like a few days after I turned 19, my dad was downstairs watching TV, and my mom was out with a friend who was having emotional issues, so I knew she would be gone most of the night. Anywho, I went to sit next to my dad. Now, me and my dad have always been super cuddly, but it had never got intimate. He is honestly the best dad ever, which is why this is a bit overwhelming to think about. So after cuddling in a spooning position for about 15 mins, I started to feel a little H out of nowhere lull. I don't know if it was the sound of my dad breathing in my ear or seeing his big-ass arm wrapped around me, but my body started to move around a bit. Long story short, my dad began to rub me, with his eyes closed on my part. It felt so good, y'all. Oh, me. I opened my legs a little to give him the hint that I wanted him to go under my panties, and he did, but he flipped me over, pulled my legs open and pushed my undies aside and said, "Don't tell Mom," and then munched me out until I finished. Afterwards, we didn't say a word and have done this now a few times.
My girlfriend's family has an intimacy ritual they want me to do because it's tradition. Now I'm rethinking my relationship. I'm getting married to my girlfriend early next year, but everything has been really weird ever since I learned about her weird tradition. I'm very familiar with her entire extended family and we get on great, for the most part. They tend to be very loud and have huge personalities, which is sometimes hard for me to deal with since I've always been on the quiet side. I don't mind sometimes since it gets me out of my comfort zone and they're very caring people, so it was a win-win situation for everybody. Because my big on family, we tend to see them often. This meant that I was in on the inside jokes, family drama, and essentially, part of the family. But I have noticed something weird that I still don't understand. Ever since we got engaged, my girlfriend's cousin makes jokes about our wedding night. Personally, I don't think a family member should be talking about that because it makes me very uncomfortable. But this particular cousin doesn't have a filter and is usually unaware about these things. I just thought it was strange for them to joke about it since I'm pretty sure her family is aware we've slept together before since we share a bed at holiday gatherings. I don't know how open my girlfriend is about our intimate life, but she has to know there are some boundaries that you just can't cross, right? Well, that's what I thought and I was wrong because a few nights ago we were discussing wedding plans and thinking about places to go on our honeymoon. She tells me that we won't need a bridal suite right away. Obviously, I ask why and she says that she'd like for us to stay at her parents' house. We're trying to save money either way, so I don't mind. However, she was very fidgety and made it seem like she had something else to say. So I ask about it and she tells me that there's a really old tradition in her family on the wedding night. What is the grossest thing you've ever done? When I was really young, like 15 years old, we had this female dog. I would just spend my days crawling around with her pretending to be a dog as well, you know, a kid being a kid. I would roll around with her in the mud, crawl around with her across the house, sometimes even try to eat out of the food bowl with her. She gave birth to 3 puppies over the course of a year. I would then pretend to be one of the puppies and do whatever they are doing as if she was my mother. Occasionally I would watch her breastfeeding her puppies and I would get curious on what it tasted like. So one day, I was playing around like normal pretending to be a puppy and after an hour or so she began breastfeeding the puppies. I then straight up sucked on her nipple along with them. Obviously I was a wee little kid so I didn't know any better. I was just trying to be a puppy too. But after getting breastfed I realized that I kinda like how it tasted. So I then would continue to drink milk from her for the next few months. It became part of my morning routine. I would even start experimenting by milking her into a cup and adding it to my cereal, or adding it to milkshakes. But remember I was just a tiny little innocent kid. One day my mom would catch me in the action, full mouth to nipple, and I got in major trouble. She thought I was mentally ill and tried to send me to a therapist, but I would tell her how I was just a child who didn't know any better. Remember I was only 15. I also told her if she would have just breastfed me herself this wouldn't have been a problem to begin with. I gained consciousness a few years later and I remembered what I'd done, and I am a bit disgusted looking back at.
What is the horniest thing you have ever done? I was 13 and recently started feeling those feelings. I was trapped inside for so long and had zero privacy. My door didn't even lock, and when I shut, someone would always want to know why. So I did what any man my age would do. I got dressed and made my way through 3 feet of snowdrifts and into the woods behind my house. I crawled down into a gully and started making a snowman in the shape of a woman on the ground. I gave her boobs, some curves, and a hole. My heart was pounding and I was about to do some. I couldn't believe what I was about to do and started thinking, yep, I'm crazy. I tried to just walk away, but I was past the point of no return. I unzipped and got busy. I was done almost as fast as I started. I got up and brushed her away as if she meant nothing to me and climbed out of the gully. Walked back to the house. Went into my room and listened to Counting Crows or some speak like I didn't just have sex with a snowman. Every time it snows. I think about this crazy story.